Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So this morning I'm going to shift gears back into more of like the charnel ground contemplations, body contemplation, but also just general arousing of energy and wanting to read some Luang Por Ban to give inspiration for living outside. He talks quite a bit about living outside, living at the foot of a tree. He speaks in praise of that quite a bit because he himself practiced that way quite a bit and gained a lot of fruits from that practice, and so I'll be reading from The Way Forward, this book of talks on monastic life by Luang Por Ban, and then we'll read a talk from the newer book, a translation that's in progress, the newer book Path and Fruit by Luang Por Ban, or Collected Teachings of Luang Por Ban. And with that one, I'll read the forward to it as well, because it gives a sense of how against books Luang Por Ban is and how hard it was to get permission to make these books of his. But it gives a flavor of the Thai forest tradition and the Kamatana tradition of Ajahn Ñāṇiko in a way that's very much like in the old days. So I'll read just a few talks on living outside to begin. This talk is called The Dhutanga of Visiting a Charnel Ground, given on July 16th, 2001. There is the Dhutanga of going to visit and dwell in a charnel ground. Presently, it doesn't make much sense to visit charnel grounds outside of the monastery, since charnel grounds have changed a lot in recent times. There aren't many real charnel grounds left where you can observe the corpse. This is because the, quote, intelligence, unquote, of the defilements has progressed and developed to the point where they conceal death, not wanting anyone to view it. They are afraid people might come to know and see the true Dhamma. Now there are special techniques for hiding the corpse as it's cremated. There are special technologies which keep it from rotting. There are techniques for keeping the smell from causing trouble and disturbing us. The, quote, superior intelligence, unquote, of the defilements has led to this kind of, quote, progress, unquote, for they would prefer to keep people from seeing the true nature of the Dhamma. Visiting a charnel ground in this day and age isn't like visiting the deserted and desolate charnel grounds of old, which were in eerie forests with frightening gnarled trees. There might be a few of these places left, but not many. Since that's the way it is now, and most locations don't have a proper charnel ground to visit, we visit and observe the charnel ground sitting right here, lying down right here, walking right here, eating here, defecating here. We are a charnel ground of things that were born and are headed toward death. Whenever the breath of that which is born and headed toward death stops, it is then something termed dead. If we're wandering around hoping to view something that has died, that movement isn't so different from the movement of something already dead. How can there be no difference between breathing and not breathing? Head hair is like this, breathing and not breathing. Body hair is like this, nails are like this, teeth are like this, skin is like this. Breathing and not breathing are one and the same. So if you want to go and visit a charnel ground, look right into this thing we call my life, and you will have an opportunity to see a real charnel ground. Once the breath stops, it will no longer be within our power to go visit a charnel ground and investigate the death of the body. The real tudong is traveling into every point in the body, liver, lungs, intestines. There's just a pile of dead stuff. This is called visiting a charnel ground and is pure Dhamma which wipes out the defilements. We went to pay respects to Luang Pu Tate Desa Rangsi during the rains. He had us listen to some of his thoughts, saying, "In the present day, monks go tudong. They go to the train station, board a train, and go as far north as they can. Then they return, headed south as far as they can go. Then they keep going all the way east, sample some of this and that, come back and disrobe. They were only seeking to give up the training all along. They die away from the high mountain of the noble ones. These days, monks go taludong, not tudong." Taludong is a play on words of tudong, and talu means just to pass straight through, and dong means the woods or the forest. So it's like taludong is like you're just going for a stroll in the woods, not tudong. This talk is called The Practice of Wandering on Tudong, 3rd of April, 2004. Recently in the north, there was a monk traveling from Chiang San to Chiang Kong. He had his bowl slung over his shoulder in the style of one wandering on Tudong, and he wanted to seek out a peaceful and inspiring place to deepen his practice. However, during his search, he realized that the present-day forests are no longer very suitable. The lush tropical jungles are all gone, and what's left is the dry, withered remnants of forest. Currently, wherever you go, it's not easy to find a forest that hasn't been burned. The current situation is not at all suitable for tudong practice. If you say you're going tudong, then go, but go for the sake of overcoming the defilements. Go for the sake of developing patient endurance and mental steadfastness, and you'll receive great benefit. Anywhere you go these days, it won't be so easy to practice there. Wherever you live, you can go tudong by going heart wandering. Wander into hair of the head. Wander into hair of the body. Wander into teeth and skin. Wherever you live, keep going tudong like this. The heart doesn't like to sit idle, so when it wants to engage in some work and when it wants to think, it just can't sit still. When we give it something, then we give it something to work at. We send it wandering to hair of the head, wandering to hair of the body, wandering to nails, wandering to teeth, wandering to skin, wandering to flesh, wandering to sinews, wandering to bones, liver, and kidneys. We send it wandering around to all the internal and external organs of the body. Wherever you wander to, stay there and rest for a while. Relax and observe things. Rest and be attentive. When you wander to hair of the head, relax and observe head hair. When you wander to hair of the body, relax and observe body hair. Relax and observe. Rest in hair of the head. Rest in hair of the body. Rest in nails. Rest in teeth. Rest in skin. Rest and be attentive. How long you rest at each place depends on the situation. Rest at each place until it feels like you've been there long enough and that it would be appropriate to move on. Hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, and skin. It's the same as going tudong outside. Some people may linger for a long time at each place, while others will move from place to place more quickly. See what kind of benefit comes from staying for the right amount of time. Going tudong like this is good. It's not so important that you go tudong in a lush, virgin forest somewhere. If there's no tudong spirit of practice and training, then the heart doesn't absorb that spirit of training. Then wandering tudong somewhere out there won't bear much fruit. Or you could say that there won't be any fruit at all. No matter how you do a tudong through lush jungles, if you don't enter the forest of the practice, if you don't enter into the jungle of birth and death, then there won't be any benefit. However, going tudong right here, right now, will give rise to superlative benefits. Anyone who wishes to gain benefit from this precious human birth, in which one has the opportunity to hear the true Dhamma and practice in line with it, should gather their heart together and wander tudong a lot. You don't have to disappear somewhere in Kanchanaburi or Tak province. If you go off to those places, but don't ready the heart for going to your own head hair, body hair, and so on, then you'll just end up all tired out. All you'll get are moods coming and chattering away about this and that. The mind is no longer interested in the benefits of peace and contentment. That kind of wandering is useless. The kind of tudong that brings benefit every time is one where the mind is with head hair and it stays with head hair for a while. The benefit of doing this arises straight away. Stay with body hair, wander to body hair and rest there. The benefit arises straight away. Nails, teeth, skin, no matter what it is, rest there for a while. Look and see what's there. Scope out the whole area. Observe the thing you've decided to stay with. There, the benefit arises straight away. Whether the benefit is great or only a little will depend on how long you stay and the thoroughness of your investigation at that particular location. Any benefit we receive will depend on our determination to focus on this practice and training. With real determination, there's only profit. This next talk is called Seeking the Practice in Forests and Mountains. That's the 28th of November, 1986, that this talk was given. The Kruba Ajahns would go wandering on tudong, for they were really determined to practice. They sought out really wild places such as lush jungle, caves, and canyons in the mountains, and would wander in stages, stopping for a while if they found a good place. Every one of them spoke in praise of seeking out good practice places in the forests and mountains, since while living in these places, their cultivation bore good fruit. They gained knowledge and vision, whichever served as a reminder for them. Compare this with cultivation in ordinary surroundings, which are neither desolate nor away from society. Lonely and desolate places, far from society, are quite secluded and peaceful, and practicing in such places in the forests and mountains allows the practice to bear good fruit. The other day I was traveling up in a mountainous region and I noticed this one small monastery. Seeing the entrance, thoughts of admiration arose toward the monk who came to this place to practice. Whenever the Kruba Ajahns stayed in wild mountains like that, they really put everything into their practice, and the fruits of such striving came forth for them. I feel that those kinds of places do foster a situation where one is more likely to put forth great effort in the practice. Passing through a mountain wilderness like this makes one keen to practice. If you're seeking solitude, then you don't necessarily have to live in a cave, especially during the cold season. Living at the foot of almost any tree will be pleasant. Clear a good walking meditation path for yourself. Set up a small cot about 40 to 50 centimeters high and just wide enough for you and your monk's requisites, such as your bowl, robes, and other things you use regularly and normally carry with you. Set up a small temporary pit toilet after you set up a cot and a walking meditation path. Wherever you stay, at least the walking meditation path and the toilet should be set up. Even if you stay there only 1 or 2 nights, it's important, if you have time, to quickly scratch out at least a rough walking meditation path. While wandering and living outside, it is good to hold to the principle of doing walking meditation and not letting it fall by the wayside. During the night, go do walking meditation outside of your mosquito net. Leave the confines of your glot. During the new moon, you can study what darkness is like. Get to know darkness. During the times when the moon is out and is more full, study what it's like for everything to be lit up during the night. Let it be a cause for investigation. During the new moon, investigate. You look for the path right in front of you, and it's completely dark. Darkness can give rise to knowledge. You can't see it, so you listen for where the path is. Totally quiet. You look for the path, and it's completely obscured by darkness. Our surrounding environment, nature, is like this. It pressures the heart into being mindful, composed, and cautious. Your location can be extremely helpful to your Dhamma practice. It can keep you on your meditation object of Buddho during walking meditation. An environment in which we are cautious will help us be more steadfast in practicing with our meditation object. There won't be so many opportunities for mindfulness to fall apart or for incessant proliferation to take over and weaken our training. However peaceful we are, however withdrawn we are, however secluded we are, however deep we are staying in an awe-inspiring forest, our sense of being cautious and careful will be that much. Listen. The calls of the animals. No matter where you are in the forest, there are wild animals. The sounds of wild animals in the evening can give rise to a sense of seclusion, in the same way that the nighttime conduces to mental seclusion. The sense of peace and seclusion increases and grows. You look for the path, and it's totally obscured by darkness. It's the nature of all people to be ever cautious and protective of themselves in such situations. If the surrounding environment has something eerie and frightening about it, the sense of caution and carefulness will rise to that level accordingly. When the moon is bright, the paths are illuminated. You can see the trees and even the shadows of the trees. There are small trees, big trees, tall trees, and short trees. Each one has its own beauty according to its nature. This is something which can give rise to knowledge and inner reflection. Each of these individual trees grew up on their own, and no two are the same. Some trees have heartwood, some are without heartwood. Some species are large, while some species are small. The coloration, form, and characteristics are not the same. Each type has a different name and designation. No matter what the trees are called, they all originated from and rose out of the ground. People label them redwood, pradu wood, tang wood, or whatever other type of wood, but the tree itself doesn't know what it is. Not a single tree knows what's happening. They don't even know that they're trees. They're just like individual pieces of earth, and those pieces of earth don't know that they are anything at all. All trees are like flecks of earth which have sprouted up. Earth sprouts up, and we label it tree or plant. People say it's a tree or not a tree. People say it's something which sprouted at some point. Worldly conventions call it a tree, but the tree doesn't know that. In the end, it's something which rose up from the ground and must eventually decompose back into the ground. It can't be something other than that, because it's something that was born from the ground as its base. They just peacefully and quietly mind their own business. There's no such thing as a tree that's restless and confused. There's no such thing as a tree with defilement and craving. Trees just abide peacefully within themselves. Earth is peaceful within itself. Water is peaceful within itself. Wind and fire are peaceful within themselves. Whether wind manifests as a cool breeze or a cold gust or whatever, that wind is peaceful within its own state. It's not busy or experiencing difficulties. It's not suffering or undergoing hardships. It doesn't have any type of defilement or craving. Water is the same. If we speak of water, it abides just like that. Whether or not people apply the designation water to it, water doesn't know. Fire is the same. Fire doesn't know anything. Fire doesn't have any kind of defilement or craving. This is just nature in the world. Whether people know about it or not, it just exists in its own way. We go to live in a place surrounded by nature. It's quiet and secluded, and we study that nature which is quiet and secluded. Insight arises, making the heart fresh and clear. We're refreshed by that nature, and the heart becomes full and happy. Whenever the heart has the opportunity to contact such peace and seclusion, it will abide within that peace. The heart will abide in that seclusion. And this talk, Be Content with Your Location, was given on 11th of July, 1981. So I'm going back even further into the past. So this talk was given over 40 years ago. The Buddha allowed us to seek out a suitable place for practice. Where one dwells should be conducive to a sense of ease. We say ease, but there are many different types of ease and many ways one can be at ease. Here we mean having an opportunity to practice and train more fully. If a certain place involves certain conditions which disturb one's mind, thus forcing the heart to get involved with that which is not Dhamma and causing it to waver, then that is a place which should be avoided. The Buddha taught that it is necessary to live in a conducive place. However, the place alone cannot ultimately be what changes Dhamma practitioners. It doesn't matter how peaceful or secluded a place is. The real necessity here is mental seclusion. If the heart isn't secluded, but restless and agitated, drifting and daydreaming, then even though you live in a secluded location, the heart isn't secluded. The heart is then filled with moods and associations, together with agitation, worry, and an insatiable longing. A heart like that is not secluded. Therefore, it is necessary to be satisfied with wherever we live, to cultivate a sense of contentment with that place. We won't be at ease if we criticize our living situation. What's more, when we're critical, then we conjure up justifications for transgressing our training standards. We'll justify it, saying, this place isn't convenient, it isn't helpful in any way. Then there's an opening because the defilements already don't want us to practice. So I urge you to cultivate a sense of satisfaction with your current living situation, whatever it may be. Whenever the practice is present, then we are capable of practicing to that extent. That place becomes a place where it's possible to practice, because Dhamma practice just means training the heart. We can live anywhere, really. Once we correct ourselves in this area, we will live happily. That's a collection of readings from The Way Forward. And then the next talk I'll read is a little bit of a different flavor, but any questions or comments on that before I move on to this new transcript? I really like his emphasis. That's one of those teachings in there really had a deep effect on me, and it was the elements, the unusual angle of coming at the elements contemplation. Earth is peaceful within itself, water is peaceful within itself, is contemplating the elements in terms of reflecting on what the nature of the enlightened mind in terms of being peaceful in and of itself, and how even a strong wind or a gust is peaceful within its own nature. So it's like that sense of the stillness within the nature, within the movement. I quite appreciated that teaching.
Ajahn, you talked a bit about tudong. Can you speak a little on the difference between tudong in Thailand and tudong here in the West?
Tudong in Thailand, tudong in the West, the difference is it's pretty much the same, although in Thailand there's a little bit less uncertainty about it because you know you're going to get fed almost anywhere you go. You can go to almost any village in the entirety of Thailand and get fed, whereas in America it's a bit more, I found it to be more of a profound experience going tudong in America because of not really being sure and going places where people don't know what you're doing and still trying to have that faith of being that you're going to be looked after. So it's a little bit more, I wouldn't say it's more difficult in America, but I found it more profound. More kind of magical in a sense, I guess, in terms of being really well looked after, even though people didn't know what we were doing. They were still drawn to that. It's like brings out the goodness in people. So it's like tudong, wandering on tudong in America, it's like a reflection that there's more good people in the world than we like to admit sometimes. That there's a lot of goodness out there, and we get to come into contact with it, and it also helps people further foster their goodness by allowing them to give an expression to their generosity. So it's like a mutually beneficial practice that you end up doing. Whereas in Thailand, it might get like, in a sense, it could be actually too easy. You can just kind of go anywhere and sort of hang out, and there's not that edge to it. So I wanted to read the introduction to this book, Path and Fruit, just to give a sense of what it's like trying to get permission to print a book from Luang Por Ban. This is it's not written by anybody in particular. It's an introduction compiled by his students. It also mentions a book that nobody's translated yet. It mentions a book called, because there's 3 books they've done. There's The Way Forward, and then this one, Path and Fruit. But before that, there was a book called The Way for Life, and that one hasn't been translated by anyone. Sometimes us students of Luang Por Ban would compile and organize his Dhamma talks from various periods. Then we would go and respectfully ask permission from Luang Por to create a book from them. He would refuse us every time, saying, "What are you doing going and printing books? There are already so many Dhamma books from great Krupa Ajahns, such as Lungta Mahabua. His teachings are the most excellent and perfect explanations of the principles and foundations available. That is good already. There's no need to print a book." Thus our wishes remained unfulfilled until Luang Por turned 80, when we asked for permission again. We tried a different approach, saying, "Luang Por, when you are gone, if somebody comes after wanting to print your teachings, there might be many mistakes and they won't have the opportunity to ask you to check and make corrections." To that, Luang Por responded, "Oi, this is becoming a real drama playing itself out. Okay, if you're going to do it, then just do it." So we were given the opportunity to create the books The Way for Life and The Way Forward. Luang Por sat and listened to us read every page to him, and he said, "I'm confident that there are no mistakes." At this time, the Bhikkhu disciples of Luang Por Ban, who have been archiving his teachings since they first started being recorded, have organized many of these teachings by category according to the path of practice. This will be most beneficial for those practitioners of great resolve, so they may reach the end of dukkha. We thus title this present work, Path and Fruit, printed in commemoration of Luang Por Ban completing 7 cycles, 84 years of life in the year 2012. With highest devotion and respect, students of Wat Doi Dhammachetty. And it starts with some opening quotes from Luang Por Ban, Ajahn Gongma, and Ajahn Ban. And this translation of Luang Por Ban, of Luang Por Ban, it was something in Isan. It's translated from Isan, and I had to have a Isan man at Wat Pananachat actually help me because it was so difficult. Just knowing Thai wasn't enough to translate this, and we had to actually talk about it for a long time to try to come up with a translation for it. And as some people might know, Ajahn Mun was a Mawlam singer before he ordained, so he was extremely good with words and improv. So this is Luang Por Ban's exhortation, translated from Isan. Work it out. If you can't do that, fetters bind you fast. Unable to succeed, we're bound above by the neck, getting led to and fro. Unable to get free, and behind our ass is getting yanked, bound to come and go. Coming and going we die, and cycle back to birth. This cycle is origination in the triple realm. This triple realm is the house where we abide. And the triple realm is, so that's like some hot, what we would call hot and spicy teaching from Ajahn Mun. And triple realm is the realm of the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm when they use that phraseology. It's the three possible realms you can be reborn into in samsara. And then a quote from Luang Por Gongma, is Luang Por Ban's teacher and one of the founders of Wat Doi Dhammachetty. And he was known for almost never speaking. And so there's no real like written down teachings of his except right here and maybe a couple other places. But he was also known for just being very plain. He was very plain when he taught. But Luang Por Ban, of course, had great respect for him. So Luang Por Gongma, he was one of Luang Por Mun's earliest disciples. The Kammatthana is the base upon which path and fruit arise. The four foundations of mindfulness, how to make them manifest. They only come to be due to this foundation of Kammatthana. That's Luang Por Gongma. And then an opening quote from Luang Por Ban. And also I can say like the way forward, the theme of the book is kind of like monastic living and etiquette and the refinements of monastic life. But this book, Path and Fruit, it's more like, it's all based around Satipatthana, but also it's like a huge compilation of all of Luang Por Ban's sort of go for it teachings, like his teachings on just getting people to get really fired up to practice. Sila, Samadhi, and Panya is the path. It is the training, it is the way. Where does this path lead? This is the path to knowing and seeing the mind clearly. The mind seen clearly is clean. It possesses brightness, uprightness, and malleability. When the mind is well established in brightness, uprightness, and malleability, then the mind is said to have Dhamma, for it has been trained by Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. If we reach the point when the mind is well trained and well tempered by Dhamma, then the mind is said to be liberated. At that time, the mind becomes Dhamma, and final release appears. And then this is the first talk in the book Path and Fruit, and it might be seen as kind of extreme by Western standards, but also it's something which is good for getting a feeling of how they were practicing in Thailand back in the day, and also he makes a point that the hard practices that are being done aren't being done in like monks coming to injury or their feet starting to bleed while they're doing walking meditation and not stopping. They're not doing it for the sake of injuring themselves, but it's for the sake of practice. So that's a very good point, because I think sometimes we might hear talks like this and think, I need to sit in full lotus until I break my legs, but then that's not why you sit in full lotus. You sit in full lotus to gain insight and have a better meditation. But if your intention is to break your legs or to injure yourself, then that's not the proper intention, and he actually says that in this talk. This talk's called The Path to an Excellent Life. Human beings are excellent beings. Us human beings have certain abilities and possess a unique brain. If we put forth the effort needed to harness this inheritance to the best of our ability, then all of us will be able to discern the supramundane qualities of Dhamma quite clearly. Without a doubt, these qualities will be self-evident. These are things which do exist, but our efforts are not up to the task, so we remain unable to open that which is closed. We remain unable to budge that which is stuck. It is possible to extract that which is embedded, but for now it is closed to us. It remains embedded just so. It remains obscure just so. If our only wish is for Nibbana, then we will achieve just that, a desire for Nibbana. No matter how bad we want it, if we don't remove the things which obscure Nibbana, then we won't get the opportunity to reach Nibbana. Indeed, the powerful tools of the defilements gain power in proportion to worldly progress. Thus, the defilements use these tools to draw the hearts and minds of all beings in the world under their sway. We cannot really estimate the total number of sentient beings in the world. We can, however, calculate the total number of human beings because the world has shrunk. This planet is as big as ever, but worldly development has made it shrink. So we have a rough estimate of the total number of human beings. If we attempt to add on all other sentient beings, we cannot calculate how many there are. But it really doesn't matter just how many sentient beings there are in the world, as they all exist under the power of and in the grip of defilement. The defilements of beings are that powerful. Only the Lord Buddha and the Savaka Arahants were able to escape the power of the defilements. How come they were able to escape? It is because they put forth the effort and energy. They had resolve. Striving, they really did it. In their Dhamma practice, they really practiced. They didn't just play around with the practice or do it as some sort of ceremony. They gave their very lives, never turning back. So we say, really do it. Do it for path, for fruit. Really go for the essence, for the source. When our teachers really did it for the essence, for the source, for the path, and for the fruit, then they reached that essence, source, path, and fruit because they really did it for that reason and no other. Luang Por Gongma once told a story about a certain Thera who was doing walking meditation. He was walking back and forth. In time, his feet got swollen. Eventually, they cracked and started bleeding. His feet bled until the walking path was covered in blood, but he didn't quit. It got to the point where he could no longer walk, so he started crawling. He wouldn't let himself quit. Why couldn't he just stop? Because he hadn't yet reached path and fruit. Because he did it for reaching path and fruit. He didn't do it for an appropriate amount of time, then stop. He didn't do it for an appropriate amount of time, then go lie down. He did it for path and fruit. As long as knowledge and vision of path and fruit hadn't appeared clearly to him, he wouldn't let himself quit. He did walking meditation until his feet were bleeding, and he wouldn't let himself quit. How could he quit? He hadn't yet reached path and fruit, so he continued by crawling. His knees bled and his hands bled, and he still wouldn't let himself quit. How could he quit? He didn't do this to injure his knees. He didn't do it to injure his hands. He didn't do it to injure his feet, but he did it for path and fruit. In the end, he realized path and fruit thus, because he did it for the sake of path and fruit, and for no reason other than this. If all of us here practice like this, it is certain that we all will realize in the same way, because the path and the fruit exist within each and every one of us. It wasn't something exclusive to the Lord Buddha. It didn't exist only for the great Arhat disciples of the Buddha either. It exists within each and every one of us. If you really do it, you really get it. If the action is true, the result must be true. So really do it. Get down to it. Dedicate yourself and get down to work, like that Thera did, walking meditation until his feet were cracked and not quitting. His knees cracked and he didn't quit. His hands cracked and he didn't quit. In the end, he realized path and fruit in line with his aim, and thus his wishes were fulfilled. That was a talk from 8th of July, 1990. And what I read into that is like perseverance. So yes, hearing this talk, people might want to go out and do walking meditation until their feet are bleeding, but to be very careful about the intention there, that the intention isn't to make our feet bleed. The intention is path and fruit, Nibbana. So making it clear that that's what the intention is. But if it leads to like the mind getting too tense or despondent, then it's not. That's not quite right either. So having to find the balance. But with this story, like that Tara he had that determination, like the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, where it was time to go for it. And I'll read just one more. From this manuscript. Okay, I like this one. This one's called Excellent Work. Practice monks have to be warriors, you know. For the moment, we can say that us monks are like soldiers. People in the military sit in lines and stand in lines. Us monks are also soldiers. Calling ourselves soldiers means that we do battle with our enemy, the kilesa. We fight the darkness and the blindness. We fight where our mind and heart are dark and shady. We fight where our mind and heart are bound up. Fight the darkness like this. Rip that which is dark and murky out of the heart. Exile the kilesa from the boundary here and make them leave the country of the heart. Us practice monks are soldiers. We aren't the kind of soldiers who carry a rifle, but we have different types of guns. Our guns are sati and panya. Sila is our weapon. Samadhi is our weapon. Panya is our weapon. These Dhamma weapons have the ability to destroy our enemy, the darkness within. Our work is the work of killing off the defilements. The Lord Buddha spoke of the work for renunciates as being the work of killing off the defilements. This kilesa, is it found in the head? Is it in your shins, your legs, or in the liver, the kidneys, the intestines, the belly, or perhaps in your bones? Does the kilesa abide in hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, or skin? The kilesa aren't found in these things, but these things are the tools of the kilesa. Do you understand? If the kilesa didn't have these things, then what could it use as a tool? Without eyes, what will the kilesa take as their tool? The eyes are a tool of the kilesa. The ears are a tool of the kilesa. The nose is a tool of the kilesa. The tongue is a tool of the kilesa. These are what the kilesa has to work with. Our whole body, within and without, is definitely a tool of the kilesa. So we have to take out the commander. He must be taken out since his army is coming, and because our work is to kill off the kilesa. So it's like this. If we just don't take anything at all as us or as a self, then where will the kilesa get their power, their sense of self from? The kilesa must have this sense of self, for they rely on it completely. They take this as a tool for making the minds and hearts of unawakened people who are still deluded into having a sense of self to become into this sense of self, which in turn causes their minds to be dark, obscure, drunk, and confused. Then come the goddesses of craving and lust. The goddess of craving is incredibly skilled at creating wanting. She is very clever at creating longing. The goddess of lust is like this too. She goes about creating ever stronger discontent. Whenever we work to lessen our obscurations, these goddesses can be expelled from the heart. We keep sending them away until we no longer take anything as being me or mine. Don't remain indifferent. Wake up. There is still much work to be done. So don't remain idle by not doing the work. We avoid our work by escaping into sleep and taking refuge in the comfort of lying down. Escaping into sleep and the comfort of lying down means we're still indifferent. There, Such a one abides under the influence of the kilesas weapons of laziness and lassitude. People who abide indifferent, do these people have it? Can they be millionaires? They follow a special path, the path which leads to extreme poverty. When this path of laziness is followed to its highest point, then one may achieve a life without shelter and without enough to eat. Renunciates who don't do the work of killing off the defilements and becoming real noble ones don't possess any wealth. They are monks without a weapon. The weapon here is Dhamma. Dhamma here means the sword of wisdom, which is sharp and penetrating on every side. It isn't just sharp on the front. It is sharp on the back and each side as well. Strike in any direction. It's razor sharp all around. This is the sword of wisdom. Look in the direction where kilesa hasn't been destroyed. It's gone. Try to see the path which was followed, not for the destruction of the kilesa. It's gone. Listen for the thoughts which were followed, not for the destruction of the kilesa. They're gone, far away. Such is the power of the Dhamma. If it isn't like that, then one won't be able to resist the power of the kilesa. So rouse yourselves. There is no work more excellent than this work which the Lord Buddha has offered us the opportunity to do. The work which the Lord Buddha has offered to us is nothing more than the work of killing off our kilesa. We kill our kilesa. We can gain victory over our kilesa. We don't need to study how to gain victory over the kilesa of other people, for that is not our work. However many beings there are in this earth, we now have the ability to gain victory over our own kilesa. Though all other beings inhabiting this earth might still have kilesa, we can abide in peace and happiness. Yes, there is no more excellent work than killing off the defilements. I'll leave it there for today. As working on this, listening to a lot of talks from Luang Por Ban, and you get a sense of his sense of patient endurance. There's one talk where it's obviously in the hot season, and in the hot season all these flies come out, and you can hear the flies buzzing around him in the recording, and he's just giving this talk, and it's just like the whole time, and he's just like talking about how hot it is and how there's flies, but it doesn't matter. You can still be at ease. So it's definitely he doesn't like to just beat around the bush. Any comments or questions? Did that sound right, Tony?
Sounds great. I'm wondering, I remember you mentioned, where you were talking about your tudong in Thailand when you got sick. And I'm wondering if it was hard to find seclusion, given the way he's talking about how things have changed and forests are disappearing and so on.
There still are a few places. Like I was in the hills with Ajahn Ñāṇiko, so there was secluded places still, but they're few and far between, and you pretty much have to go pretty far to find seclusion. But it is still possible to do tudong through these big jungles. There's Ajahn Sek would lead tudongs through this. It's the biggest national park in Thailand. It's called Tung Yai, which means big bag. And that's still, you can still do an epic tudong like in the old days through Tung Yai, but there's not so many places. And I think he's more referring to actually like living on tudong like Ajahn Mun did, where it's actually not so easy to find really suitable places. Because you also like to live the way Ajahn Mun did. You have to actually find a village, but be able to live close enough to a village to go alms around. but then in the old days you'd still have really thick jungle even next to the villages. And Ajahn Mun's home village had 8 houses and was surrounded by jungle, so even he kind of grew up in it. But I also know what he's talking about. Like if you're just in the city of Chiang Mai, there is smoke everywhere. Everybody's burning the forest down for the fields, and it's like hazy everywhere. You have the burnt, withered remnants of forest. And every Kruba Ajahn will have like a different style. Of course, you'll read Luang Por Liam, and he won't necessarily have this kind of hard-hitting style, but a lot of the Dhamma will be the same.
Has Ajahn Liam ever left Wat Pah Pong?
What's that?
Has Ajahn Liam ever left Wat Pah Pong?
Oh yeah, he's lived in different places a lot. Many times he's spent vasa elsewhere. Yeah. And Luang Por Ban went to Luang Por Cha's funeral. So Luang Por Pasano has like a long history relationship with Luang Por Ban. They've got and when I went to see Luang Por Ban in 2016, and I said, "Oh, Ajahn Pasano passes on his respects and greetings to you," and he said, "Oh, I miss Ajahn Pasano. He hasn't been in Thailand for a long time." So they have a nice relationship.
Ajahn, I'm wondering about like how to kind of dedicate oneself to the practice in such a way that is kind of being described in these talks, like wholeheartedly just going for it.
It's perseverance. You have to find that edge. You have to find that edge where you're pushing yourself and you're practicing hard, but it's sustainable. But if you just crash and then end up having no energy for days, then you've gone too far and it's not sustainable. So it has to build up. It has to build up over time. Like that story about the Tara doing walking meditation, one thing worth noting is that he was a Tara. He was already a senior monk at that point. So he obviously had been practicing, but then finally reached a point where he decided that he was going to go for it. And so that's brought up in the suttas as well, that there's these 3 times that the devas rejoice in a practitioner. One is at the time of the pabaja, at the going forth. The second time is when they make the resolve, I'm now going to attain Nibbana. When they make that true resolve, when it's actually based in an ability they've developed. That's the second time they rejoice. And the third time they rejoice is when they do attain Nibbana. I was at Ajahn Mahabua's funeral and got the opportunity to meet and pay respects to this monk named Luang Por Bun Chaloi. And he is a disciple of Luang Por Jia. And apparently Luang Por Bun Chaloi is someone who is one of the few Ajahns who was able to make the Buddha Aditana, which is, may my flesh and blood dry up, and I'm just going to sit here till I'm enlightened, and it actually worked. That almost never happens. Usually it's like people either they're not ready to make that determination, or they end up going off on some tangent, and going crazy, or just damaging themselves somehow. But he was there, and then there was this other monk with him who was also very, very peaceful. And Ajahn Bun Chaloi was doing Q&A with the Wat Pah Sangha there, and I remember it was quite memorable because in the Dhammayut sect, they in a lot of these monasteries, they allow smoking of cigarettes. And so he was like rolling and in the Wat Papong and Wat Pananachat Sangha, it's very, very strict. We would never smoke in our monasteries. But it was kind of like a teaching, because Wat Pananachat had a new abbot at the time, and he was there, and it's kind of like, do you have advice for a new abbot? And he was just kind of like, then he just didn't say anything, and he just like rolled a cigarette. And he was just like rolling this cigarette, and then he sort of like, it was like village tobacco, which is supposed to be super, super strong. And then he like did some sort of like motion where he's like, whoa, like he closed it off and like lit it up. And then he took a huge drag from his cigarette, and then he was like, let it drift out of his nose, and then he answered the question. It's like, wow, that's unbelievable. And he said, he's like, yeah, we don't really think of ourselves as abbots. It's just everybody practicing together. Like, it was just, I found it super inspiring. But also the monk sitting next to him was very, very peaceful and never said anything, but it was like he didn't have to say anything. And I was also very inspired by this monk who was also very senior, and just sitting next to him and seemed very content and peaceful and at ease, yet without saying anything. He just didn't, and he wasn't like restless or anything. He was obviously very special as well, but the whole time he never said anything. He was just sitting there. So I was kind of taken by that as well. It's a whole nother level.
I was wondering, are there any things in Luang Por Ban's monastery that are like sort of characteristic sort of things?
Definitely.
Is sort of hard-hitting kind of style of teaching?
Well, his monastery is probably one of the most detailed with the core Wat out of any monastery in Thailand. And one thing he's big on is like, well, they're sweeping all the time. It's a big sweeping monastery, so all the paths have to be swept every day in the entire monastery. But also, something he was very fastidious about was shoes. Like, people's shoes can't just be thrown off, or like they all have to be perfectly straight at the edge of the Dhamma hall or whatever. So, and he's very, but within that, very, very at ease. Interestingly enough, Wat Doi Dhamma Chedi, as far as all the monasteries, and which isn't very many, I haven't been to that many monasteries in Thailand, but of the monasteries I've been to in Thailand, Wat Doi Dhamma Chedi made me think the most of Abhayagiri, actually, more than Wat Papong. Wat Papong is different than Abhayagiri, but Doi Dhamma Chedi seem to have like a similar energy somehow. And I don't know why that was, because certainly they're stricter than us in many ways, but maybe it was because like we were there for the mealtime and the buffet table was kind of similar. And just, I guess the energy of the monks was kind of similar, the harmony of the community. Okay, we'll leave it there.